The Atlantic sturgeon is a truly incredible creature that swims in North America's rivers and coastlines, with a rich evolutionary and cultural history. Sturgeons are some of the most ancient fish that live in the Atlantic Ocean, and they've lived alongside humans for hundreds of years. Their meat first sustained the native tribes that called North America home, and then the British settlers of Jamestown in 1607. Today, humans harvest their eggs for caviar, which is a luxury delicacy that can sell for hundreds of dollars a can. But it's exactly the Atlantic sturgeon's shared territory with humanity that puts the survival of its species in question. Within the last 100 years, sturgeon populations have only continued to plummet, and today, the Atlantic sturgeon is considered endangered with multiple populations already extinct. So, the big question, what are we actually doing to protect this species? And even more importantly, how effective are the measures that we're taking? In this video, we'll be embarking on a journey to discover the biology and conservation of the incredible and endangered Atlantic sturgeon. First, let's go over their biology. Atlantic sturgeon have skin rather than scales, and they have 5 rows of protective bony plates. Their skeletons are made from cartilage, which is the same stuff that shark skeletons are made from. Despite their imposing armor, Atlantic sturgeon don't always hunt other fish. They're mainly bottom feeders that eat crustaceans, worms, and mollusks. They have 4 barbels under their noses, each one covered in taste buds, and they use them to search for food in murky water. They can even detect electric signals. These sturgeon range all along the eastern coast of North America, from Hamilton Inlet in Labrador, Canada, to Cape Canaveral in Florida in the US. They're sometimes confused with short-nosed sturgeon, which is a similar species that often shares the same waters as the Atlantic sturgeon. They hatch in freshwater rivers, and they spend the first few years of their lives in freshwater before they migrate to the sea. When the sturgeon are mature, they go back to the river where they were hatched in order to reproduce, or, in other words, to spawn. Atlantic sturgeon are considered a anadromous species because they spawn in freshwater and live in saltwater. The colder the water they live in, the slower the sturgeon mature. Atlantic sturgeon from the northwestern Atlantic don't become adults until they're at least 20 years old, and they can live up to 60 years. Sturgeon from populations closer to the equator, on the other hand, mature a lot more quickly at 5 to 19 years, and they likely live only half as long as their northern counterparts. That's a pretty big difference. Because it takes so long for the sturgeon to reach reproductive age, protection for the species is a challenge, and it has to take place over a long time scale. They're listed as endangered on the Endangered Species Act, or the ESA, and they're separated into 5 main populations, sorted by location: the Gulf of Maine, New York, Chesapeake Bay, Carolina, and South Atlantic. But aside from their longevity, what exactly is causing these fish to be endangered? Despite the fact that fishing Atlantic sturgeon has been banned in the US for over 20 years, the species is still nowhere close to recovering. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, the main factors threatening the Atlantic sturgeon's survival are dams that block access to spawning habitats, worsening water quality, fishing bycatch, and vessel strikes. So, let's start with the dams. River dams are often important in human infrastructure because of their ability to generate electricity, store water for farm irrigation, and enable historical commercial boating. But as beneficial to society as they are, dams aren't often built with the local fish population in mind. Because Atlantic sturgeon are anadromous, they require access to freshwater in order to reproduce and continue their species. And therein lies the problem. Dams block over 60% of historical spawning habitat for the Carolina and South Atlantic populations of sturgeon, preventing them from migrating upriver to reproduce. The biggest river system in North Carolina, the Cape Fear River, is dammed at 3 main locations, And it's these 3 dams that are the main obstacles to more Atlantic sturgeon migration in the state. In 2013, NOAA put together an action plan to modify these dams to allow migratory fishes to pass. Since then, only the first dam has been successfully modified, meaning that the sturgeon aren't out of the woods yet. North Carolina's Wildlife Department stated in 2021 that making the second dam more accessible for Atlantic sturgeon should be a high priority. But since then, the project has been stalled by funding issues. According to a disposition report released by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in 2020, while funds have been appropriated and construction completed to address rehabilitation of several items at Lock-in Dams numbers 1 and 2 to improve stability, it remains unlikely that federal funding to construct additional fish passage facilities will be received. That's not great news. So what about water quality then? Thankfully, progress on improving water conditions for Atlantic sturgeon has been faring a lot better than the fish passage measures. Nonprofit groups are pushing corporations and governments to take better care of Atlantic sturgeon habitats. In 2020, nonprofit organization the Delaware Riverkeeper Network sued the Environmental Protection Agency for failing to announce stricter water quality standards in the Delaware River, specifically dissolved oxygen. Like humans, fish like Atlantic sturgeon need oxygen to survive. We breathe oxygen directly through the air, but sturgeons use their gills to take in oxygen dissolved in the water. That became an issue when water pollution resulted in dangerously low dissolved oxygen levels in the Delaware River. A study from 1998 shows that low oxygen conditions result in much higher mortality in Atlantic sturgeon juveniles, and a growth rate 3 times slower than normal. The Philadelphia Water Department had its doubts about the whole livable water quality thing, though. At a hearing about the proposed dissolved oxygen regulations, here's what one of their representatives had to say. Yogi Berra once said, "You've got to be very careful. If you don't know where you're going, you might not get there." I'd like to paraphrase Yogi by saying, if you don't look for something, you might not find it. Such is the case with the Atlantic sturgeon in the Delaware River. So, any Yankees fans convinced? In September of 2025, the Environmental Protection Agency sided with the nonprofit and implemented stricter water quality standards for the Delaware River, which is a huge win for the Atlantic sturgeon. More dissolved oxygen in the water means a better chance for juvenile sturgeon to live to adulthood. The water quality lawsuit isn't the only one that the Delaware Riverkeeper Network has filed on behalf of the Atlantic sturgeon. In October of 2024, the nonprofit teamed up with another nonprofit, simply named Riverkeeper, to file 3 lawsuits against New York, Delaware, and New Jersey. The suit accused them of failing to address the illegal capture and killing of Atlantic sturgeon by commercial fishing operations, or, in a word, bycatch. Bycatch is a term for when commercial fishing operations unintentionally catch species of fish that they weren't trying to target, which usually results in the death of the fish. If a boat targeting a different species accidentally catches an Atlantic sturgeon, it's legally required to release the sturgeon back into the sea, but by then it might be too late. Being caught as bycatch often injures or kills the sturgeon, even when the fishermen aren't trying to hurt them. Okay, so imagine you're a sturgeon. Your waters are breathable, and you've just dodged a trawl net by a fin's width. Surely you're in the clear now, right? Yep, that's right. Atlantic sturgeon are also in danger of getting hit by boats. Between 2007 to 2010, 31 adult Atlantic sturgeon carcasses were found floating in the James River, which flows into Chesapeake Bay, and most of them had gashes and wounds from vessel propellers. Exact population size estimates are difficult since the sturgeon are so long-lived. But in 2007, the best guess of the Atlantic Sturgeon Status Review team was that there were fewer than 300 spawning adults per year in most populations. With so few adults remaining, any unnecessary death is a pretty big deal. Not only that, it's likely that most vessel strike mortalities aren't reported at all, meaning that there are probably even more sturgeon being killed than we think there are. According to a dissertation by Matthew Belazic from 2012, only an estimated 31% of Atlantic sturgeon killed by boat propellers are recorded by scientists. Vessel strike mortalities are hard for boat operators to prevent, since they can't easily see what's going on at the bottom of the river. In my research, I couldn't find any proposed solutions to the issue, but please let me know in the comments if you know of any. Scientists are working hard to learn more by investigating citizen reports of sturgeon carcasses washing up on shores or floating at the surface of the rivers. So, now that we've gone over the main threats driving the Atlantic sturgeon to extinction, what's next? I don't have all the answers, but I do have some closing thoughts. Over the course of researching this video, I learned a lot about the invisible efforts from people who care that don't make it to mainstream media. Hundreds of people have been involved in the tagging and monitoring of this endangered fish, the lawsuits, the campaigns, the research, and most of them won't ever see public recognition for their work. The Atlantic sturgeon's range is so huge that it can't be saved by just one person or one group. Matthew Belazic, for example, is one of the most prolific and dedicated Atlantic sturgeon researchers of our time. But as amazing as his work in the Chesapeake Bay is, it's just not possible for him to be in every river system on the East Coast at once. That takes a network of people that truly believe in their work and aren't afraid of slow, incremental progress. I think that sometimes it can be easy to lose hope in the face of problems that seem insurmountable, like an endangered, ancient fish slipping away from us, below the surface of the waves. But I also think that hope comes from the collective efforts of humans that believe they can make a difference, no matter how small. One coin cast into a wishing well might not change much, but 1,000? Together, those ripples have the power to change the future. Thank you so much for watching. This video wouldn't have existed without my friend Ocean Druid, who was the one that inspired me to research the Atlantic sturgeon in the first place. I also want to thank the people at the Harbor's Video Project for lending me the use of their clip from 2021, as well as Reddit user Slacker130 for the use of their video from September 2025. Let me know if you find any inconsistencies in the video, and you're totally welcome to fact-check me. There's a Google Doc with all of my sources in the description below. If you want to support the fight for the Atlantic sturgeon, please check out the nonprofit organizations Delaware Riverkeeper Network and Riverkeeper, and consider donating if you're in the financial position to do so. They do some pretty incredible work, and they have spent over a decade pushing our representatives to take better care of America's natural habitats. You can find a link to their websites in the description below.